Hey, you ever had that conversation with your wife? We need to talk about our relationship. Yeah, those come up, don't they? And they, unfortunately, put the fear of God in us because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to respond to that kind of conversation or that request. But, you know, it points out a difference between men and women as far as relationship goes. Men tend not to focus much on relationships, and we're not really trained, throughout most of our lives to work on relationships. And yet, women, that is the primary concern of them in their relationships. So when it comes down to talking about relationships, it makes us nervous. We don't know what to do. We feel like we're being ambushed. Maybe she's got ammunition that we don't know about. Something's going to happen that's bad. All those things tend to run through our minds. And so we get our backs up, we get defensive, we get ready to attack, defend, whatever's required to keep our ego intact. And of course, that doesn't work at all. And most of the time, we have to learn the hard way that relationships are not like a refrigerator where you plug them in, they run for about 20 years without any maintenance. They're more like a day-to-day kind of nurturing requirement for a plant or something like that. It takes daily cultivation and paying attention to the details to make them work. Women know this. They sort of know it intuitively. We've never had to worry about that much because we're supposedly in charge. But if you've had a problem with relationships either at work or at home or in casual relationships, or if you have a temper that tends to go off pretty quickly, or if you're defensive, or if you act like, maybe things don't matter to you and you're just a tough guy, as desperado as the Eagles would say. If that's you, you're going to have problems in a relationship because dealing with the relationship itself is part of the deal. It just goes with the territory. So you got to get used to it. So how do we handle that? I mean, what's the answer to being in tune with the other person in a relationship and at the same time still being ourselves? Well, there's a couple of answers to that, but I think the first one is to pay attention to the needs of the other person. Just because she needs reassurance or asks questions that seem insecure or whatever the case may be doesn't mean she's wrong, doesn't mean you're right, doesn't mean you need to ignore her request or that it's outrageous or impossible. It just means you've got a situation to deal with in which there's an imbalance in the relationship. You're feeling okay and everything's fine with you, but she's feeling a little insecure and needs some reassurance. So when she says we need to talk about our relationship, that's what she's getting at. We need to talk about how we operate, how we function, how we talk to each other, how we behave, what things are important to us, how we're handling conflict with each other, and I think also very much the question of how do we get to a point where we're confident we have a process for solving problems and handling conflict, and it doesn't disrupt the relationship. I've had times in my life when a small situation would set me off and I would stay mad for a couple of days, and just think about the cost of doing that. It deprives you of a closeness that you really should have in a relationship. And it also means that the other person is feeling alienated from you and you're feeling alienated from them. And so there's something bad wrong there. So my policy now, and I think it should be the policy for all of us, is to get the thing over with, get it done, get back to as normal a routine as soon as possible. Now, that does not mean let's go have sex and everything's going to be okay. Because unfortunately, a lot of men operate that way, to think that all we need to do is have sex and it shows we love each other and we're back into the saddle again. Well, that's not how she sees it for sure. And in fact, she may not be interested in sex at all until the relationship is on a more even keel. So, bearing all that in mind, what is the strategy that we can use to help us get through relationship issues, stay focused on the other person's needs, reassure them that things are okay and that long term we're going to be all right, and to give them their space if that's what's needed. So that's a tall order, and sometimes it's hard for us to do as men because that's just not something we're used to. But I want to point out something. From the age of about 7 years old, little boys are taught not to pay much attention to relationships, and instead to start getting involved in violent behavior and blowing things up and doing things that are action-oriented and that kind of stuff. That's their focus, and they stay that way pretty much until adulthood. And so consequently, they miss out on some of the more subtle things of relationships. I'm making a generalization here, but my point is that unless you have a mother who insists that you handle relationships wisely, there's a good chance you didn't learn much about how to do that. And here's the other thing. Your style of handling conflict or relationship issues, whatever it is, in the family that you came from, it's going to be different from the family that your wife came from. And so when those two positions run into each other, there's going to be conflict, and one's going to be thinking the other is wrong and their process is right and all of that. But what really matters here is that you're willing to take a hard look at yourself and say, maybe I'm a little bit harsh, maybe I'm too demanding, maybe I'm making ultimatums where there don't need to be ultimatums, things like that, and give it a chance to be honest with yourself and look at what things you can do to make the relationship run more smoothly. And here's something else. If our car starts acting up, we take it to the mechanic. We don't think a thing about that and spend whatever the mechanic says to get it running back again. And the same thing for appliances around the house or whatever else has gone wrong. Why do we not do that about our marriage or our relationships? It's tough. A lot of men are very resistant to go to counseling, and yet a counselor can help you see through some of these issues that you're wrestling with and why she gets upset when you say things a certain way or use a certain tone of voice or speak to her in language that doesn't seem friendly or accommodating. So why not spend the money, spend the time, spend the energy to learn about yourself, learn what can be done differently, and talk to a counselor by yourself, first of all, if that's important. And then secondly, go with your wife, especially if she's asking you to go, and see if you can work this thing out before it becomes a major conflict and ends up in divorce court, because that happens a lot. I've seen marriages that really the conflict could have been handled very smartly at the beginning and very proficiently, and instead it's allowed to fester and continue to get worse, and the name calling and the recriminations and all that just make it impossible to solve. I want to mention one more thing before we wrap up. This relationship thing gets to be deadly. I've known couples, individuals and couples who have not spoken to their own children for as much as 20 or 30 years. What is up with that? How can you ignore or go without contact with your own flesh and blood for 20 or 30 years because of some argument or some disagreement or something of that nature? Learn how to handle the conflict, learn how to resolve it, learn how to reconcile, get things back on an even keel, learn how to use conciliatory language, negotiate what you need to negotiate, and make things work out for the better. There's a lot at stake here. The family, the children, the future, your job sometimes. These things really matter, and I've seen individuals get fired from from really good paying jobs because they just couldn't get along with people or did not know how to resolve conflict or handle relationships within the management situation. Well, anyway, that's probably enough about that, but I would just ask you to pay attention to relationships, get focused on them. They are the wheels that run the world. And if you don't know how to do relationships well, you're probably going to have some problems down the road. There's a lot more detail about this kind of stuff on the website, meninbalance.org. And there's a radio station, meninbalance.org/radio, in which you'll find information like this 24/7. It's a chance for you to talk about it and listen to it there. Also, I would suggest maybe you take this video and play it for a group such as your church group or just a group of guys to get together and have a discussion about it. That's what Men in Balance does, is try to get guys talking about the real stuff that life is made of and how we might improve our lives accordingly. Thanks for watching. Of course, you know, if you like the video, give us a like and subscribe so you can take part in future videos. And if you got comments, leave them down below and I'll respond if I can. Thanks again for watching. Have a good day. I'm Jerry Hancock from Men in Balance.